Nobody wanted to hear from old soldiers anymore. Draven Solrath knew this as he sat in the observation gallery of the Grand Assembly Chamber. His empty sleeve, where his fourth arm used to be, hung loose against his side. 200 years of life had taught him many things, but the hardest lesson was this. The young always believed they knew better than those who had bled for them. Below him, 12 species representatives sat in their floating pods. The chamber glowed with soft blue light from the living walls. Everything here was beautiful and clean. These politicians had never seen the darkness between stars. They had never smelled burning flesh or heard the screams of dying soldiers. High Arbiter Yold, a tall luminary female with skin like polished silver, raised her hand for silence. Her voice flowed like music through the chamber. We are here to discuss expansion into the Orion Arm. Ambassador Fennec, please present your findings. A young Stellan male rose from his pod. His 4 eyes gleamed with ambition. Draven had seen that look before, on officers who sent others to die while they counted profits. Thank you, High Arbiter, Fennec said. Our probes have completed mapping the Orion Arm. We have discovered 17 habitable worlds and 1 spacefaring civilization. Holographic images appeared in the center of the chamber. A blue and green planet filled the display. They call themselves humans, Fennec continued. A young species, perhaps 300 years into space travel. Primitive technology. Limited military capability. They appear to have significant internal conflicts among themselves. Soft laughter rippled through the council. A divided species was an easy target. I propose we initiate first contact with the intention of establishing labor agreements. Humans are reportedly resilient creatures with high physical endurance. They could prove valuable in our mining operations. Draven's remaining 3 hands curled into fists. Labor agreements. Such clean words for slavery that he stood before he could stop himself. I must speak. Every eye in the chamber turned toward him. High Arbiter Yold's expression flickered with annoyance. Commander Solrath, you are here as a ceremonial observer. This is not your forum. With respect, High Arbiter, I have information this council needs to hear. About humans? Ambassador Fennec's voice dripped with amusement. What could a retired warrior know about a species we just discovered? I know them because I have faced them. Silence fell across the chamber. Even the ambient hum of the station seemed to quiet. High Arbiter Yold leaned forward. Explain. Draven descended the steps to the main floor. His old bones ached with every movement, but he kept his spine straight. A soldier never showed weakness. 40 years ago, I served aboard the patrol vessel Crimson Dawn. We responded to a distress signal from mining station Koros in the boundary zone. He paused, gathering the memories he had tried so hard to bury. We found the station's crew dead, all 50 of them, killed by a single human. Ambassador Fennec laughed openly. 1 human killed 50 Kathrani miners? Commander, perhaps your memory has suffered with age. My memory is perfect, Draven said quietly. I remember every moment of that night. I remember watching my captain die. I remember the screams of warriors 3 times that human size as she hunted them through the darkness. She, another representative spoke up. A female of their species? Yes. Young. Small. She weighed perhaps 60 kilograms. She had been captured by smugglers operating from the station. They planned to sell her to a research facility. Draven looked around the chamber, meeting each representative's eyes. When she escaped her restraints, she did not run. She did not hide. She killed every single being on that station who had participated in her capture. She used pipes, tools, and the environment itself as weapons. She vented atmosphere into sealed rooms. She started chemical fires. She was systematic, patient, and absolutely without mercy. And how did you survive? High Arbiter Yold asked, her voice cold. Because I showed her a moment of kindness before she escaped. I treated her like a person instead of cargo. That small act was the only reason she let me live. The council exchanged glances. Draven could see the disbelief in their eyes. Commander, Yold said slowly, we appreciate your service, but this account seems highly exaggerated. Our data shows humans to be a fractured, primitive species. Your data is wrong. Or incomplete. Humans come from a death world. Their planet is filled with predators, diseases, and environmental extremes. They did not survive by being weak. Ambassador Fennec waved his hand dismissively. One incident, 40 years ago, involving a single desperate individual, hardly representative of an entire species. Draven reached into his coat and pulled out a small crystal. Before I let her leave that station, she gave me this. A message for anyone foolish enough to threaten her kind again. He activated the crystal. A hologram appeared. A human female, older than the one Draven had known, but unmistakably Annie Webb. Behind her, massive warships hung in construction frames. Her voice filled the chamber. Tell your leaders that humanity remembers. We remember every ship that disappeared, every family torn apart, every child sold to laboratories. When we are ready, we will come not as slaves, but as equals. Pray that your people greet us with open hands, because we have learned what happens when your kind greets us with chains. The hologram faded. High Arbiter Yold's silver face had paled slightly. Then she laughed, a nervous sound that others quickly echoed. A threat from a primitive species? Commander, you have given us entertainment, nothing more. The vote on human contact will proceed tomorrow. Draven bowed his head. They would not listen. They never did. The distress signal had been repeating for 6 hours before the Crimson Dawn reached Station Koros. Lieutenant Draven stood at his post in the security bay, checking his weapon for the third time. He was young then, barely 70 years old, with all 4 arms intact and a head full of dreams about glory and honor. He had not yet learned that the universe cared nothing for such things. Captain Morvitha's voice crackled through the ship's communication system. All security personnel, prepare for boarding. The station has gone dark. Expect hostile conditions. The mining station hung in the void like a wounded animal. No lights. No movement. The docking bay doors were frozen open, which meant the emergency seals had failed. Whatever had happened here, it had happened fast. Draven followed his team through the airlock. Their helmet lights cut through absolute darkness. The walls were streaked with something dark. It took him a moment to realize it was blood, Kathrani blood. Spread out, Captain Morvith ordered. Find survivors. They found bodies instead. Miners crumpled in corridors. Workers slumped over control panels. The count reached 50 before they finished searching the upper levels. What could have done this? One of the younger soldiers whispered. Captain Morvith studied the wounds on the nearest corpse. These injuries are not from weapons fire. Look at the patterns. Blunt force. Sharp implements. Someone did this by hand. By hand. Captain, that would require incredible strength. Or incredible determination. They found the lower level sealed. Emergency bulkheads had been manually activated from inside. It took the engineering team 20 minutes to cut through. Behind the bulkhead, they found a cargo container. Inside the cargo container, they found her. She was small. Impossibly small. Pale skin stretched over thin bones. Dark hair matted with dirt and dried blood. Her eyes were closed, and for a moment Draven thought she was dead. Then she moved. Her eyes opened. They were brown, the color of soil from pictures Draven had seen in educational files. She looked at the soldiers surrounding her, and Draven saw no fear in her gaze. Only exhaustion. What is it? Someone asked. Captain Morvith consulted his scanner. Bipedal mammalian. Origin unknown. The station logs show she was brought here 3 days ago by a smuggling vessel. A slave? Most likely. The miners here were known to deal in exotic specimens. Research facilities pay well for new species. The human female watched them speak. She clearly did not understand their language. Draven saw intelligence in her eyes, a sharp awareness that tracked every movement, every weapon. Take her to medical, Captain Morvith ordered. Restrain her and begin analysis. She may be worth something to the science division. They carried her out of the cargo container. She did not struggle. She seemed almost cooperative, which Draven found strange for a captured creature. He was assigned to guard the medical bay that night. The human lay on the examination table, her wrists and ankles locked into metal restraints. Medical drones hummed around her, taking samples and measurements. She watched them with those brown eyes, patient and still. Draven found himself curious. He approached the table slowly. Can you understand me? He asked. No response. He tried different frequencies on his translator, cycling through known languages. Nothing worked. Of course it would not. This species had never been contacted before. The human tilted her head, studying him the same way he studied her. Draven pulled a water container from his belt and held it up. He mimed drinking. Then he offered it to her. For a long moment, she did not move. Then, Slowly, she nodded. Draven released one of her hands so she could drink. It was against protocol. He could have been disciplined for it. But something about her made him want to show kindness. She was so small, so helpless. She drank the entire container. When she finished, she looked at him and spoke a single word in her language. He did not understand it then. Later, he would learn it meant, "Thank you." He secured her hand again and stepped back. "Rest now. Tomorrow, the captain will decide what happens to you." The human closed her eyes. Draven left the medical bay and returned to his quarters. He slept poorly that night. Troubled by dreams of brown eyes watching him from darkness, he woke to screaming. The station's emergency lights were flashing red. His communicator erupted with panicked voices. "She's loose. The specimen is loose. Security Team 7 is down. All of them. Where is she? Where is she?" Draven grabbed his weapon and ran into the corridor. The emergency lights cast everything in crimson shadows. Somewhere in the distance, he heard gunfire, then silence. His communicator crackled one final time. Captain Morvith's voice, strained with pain, and something Draven had never heard from his commander before, fear. "She was not the prey," Morvith gasped. "We were. All along, we were the prey." The transmission cut off. Draven stood alone in the red darkness, and somewhere in the station, footsteps were approaching, soft, patient, unhurried. The hunter was coming. The footsteps stopped somewhere in the darkness ahead. Draven pressed himself against the wall, his weapon raised. The red emergency lights painted everything in blood. His heart pounded so hard he could hear them in his ears. He had trained for combat his entire life. He had fought pirates, rebels, and hostile species across a dozen systems. Nothing had prepared him for this. The corridor ahead was empty. Then it was not. She stepped out of the shadows like she had been born from them. The human female, Annie. He did not know her name yet, but he would never forget it. She was covered in blood. None of it was hers. In her hands, she held a metal pipe, bent and dented from use. Her brown eyes found him in the darkness. Draven raised his weapon. His fingers trembled on the trigger. She did not move, did not attack. She just watched him with those terrible, patient eyes. "Why?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why did you do this?" She did not understand his words, but she understood the question. She pointed down the corridor, toward the cargo bay where they had found her. Then she made a gesture with her hands. Chains. She was miming chains around her wrists. Then she pointed at him and tilted her head. "A question. Did you know?" Draven thought of the cargo container, the smuggler's logs, the research facilities that paid for exotic specimens. He thought of his captain's casual orders to restrain and study her. He lowered his weapon. "No," he said. "I did not know what they planned to do with you." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she lowered the pipe. They stood in the red darkness, predator and prey, neither certain which was which. The human pointed at herself and spoke a single word. Her name, Annie. Draven touched his chest. "Draven." Annie nodded slowly. Then she turned and walked toward the station's command center. After a moment, Draven followed. He did not know why. Perhaps because she had let him live. Perhaps because he needed to understand. She led him through corridors filled with death. Bodies everywhere. Some had been killed quickly. Others had not been so fortunate. "How?" Draven asked. "How did you kill so many?" Annie glanced back at him. She seemed to understand. She stopped beside a wall panel and pointed at the environmental controls. Then she made a pushing motion with her hands. She had vented atmosphere into sealed sections. Suffocated entire teams at once. Draven felt sick. They reached the command center. Annie went straight to the data terminal and began working. Her small fingers moved across controls designed for larger hands, but she adapted quickly. She was searching for something. "What are you looking for?" Draven asked. Annie pulled up a file. "Transport records. Names and coordinates." She pointed at 2 entries, and Draven saw her eyes fill with something that made his blood run cold. Grief. "Your family," he guessed. She nodded. 2 names. 2 destinations. Research facilities deep in Concordat space. Annie copied the data to a small device she had taken from one of the bodies. Then she turned to face Draven fully. She spoke in her language, words he could not understand. But her meaning was clear from her gestures and expression. "I am going to find them. Anyone who gets in my way will die. The authorities will hunt you," Draven said. "Our ships are faster. Our weapons are stronger. You cannot fight the entire Concordat. Annie smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. She walked to the viewport and pointed at the stars. Then she touched her chest and made a spreading motion with her hands. More of us. Out there. Waiting, Draven felt the cold spread through his body. How many humans are there? He asked. Annie held up her hands. 10 fingers. Then she did it again. And again. And again. Billions. There were billions of them. She turned back to him and spoke once more. This time, he understood the word. She had heard the crew use it during her captivity. Remember? Then she picked up her pipe and walked toward the docking bay. She was leaving, taking one of the shuttles to continue her hunt. Draven should have stopped her, should have shot her in the back. That was his duty. Instead, he watched her go at the airlock. She paused and looked back at him one final time. Draven. She touched her throat and spoke carefully, forcing the alien sounds through her mouth. Good. Then she was gone. Draven stood alone in the station filled with the dead. He was the only survivor. When the rescue ships arrived, he would tell them a story about a containment breach and hostile creatures. He would bury the truth because he was afraid. Not afraid of Annie. Afraid of what would happen when his people finally understood what humans truly were. Not victims. Not slaves. Not prey. Survivors. And survivors, he was learning, were the most dangerous things in the universe. The laughter died slowly in the grand assembly chamber. Draven watched the council representatives shift in their floating pods. Annie's holographic message still hung in the air, her final words echoing in the silence that followed. High Arbiter Yold recovered first. She always did. Politicians learned to hide their fear behind smiles. Commander Solrath, she said, her voice smooth as glass. We thank you for sharing this colorful account. However, I must point out several concerns with your testimony. She waved her hand, and new data appeared in the center of the chamber. Charts, statistics, images of primitive human cities and their crude spacecraft. Our probes have studied human civilization for 5 years. Their technology is 2 centuries behind our own. Their planet is divided into competing nations that regularly fight each other. They have no unified military, no central government, and no experience with interstellar warfare. Ambassador Finnick nodded eagerly. Furthermore, the incident you describe occurred 40 years ago. Even if this human female was as dangerous as you claim, she represents a single individual. Hardly a threat to the Galactic Concordat. You do not understand, Draven said quietly. She was not special. She was ordinary. An ordinary human from an ordinary colony ship. If one ordinary human could do what she did, imagine what they could accomplish together. More laughter rippled through the chamber. The Stellan trade representatives whispered among themselves, already counting future profits. Commander, High Arbiter Yold said, with all respect to your service record, perhaps the trauma of that night has affected your judgment. The Kathrani High Command has no record of this incident. Nothing in our archives mentions Station Koros or any human encounter. Because they buried it. Draven's voice rose with frustration. They classified everything. They were afraid. Our own military knew the truth and chose to hide it rather than face the consequences. Afraid, a Luminari representative scoffed. The Kathrani have the second largest fleet in Concordat space. What could you possibly fear from primitives? Draven pointed at Annie's frozen hologram. Look at her. Look at the ships behind her. Those are not primitive vessels. Humans have been watching us, learning from us. They have had decades to prepare while we ignored them. Prepare for what? Ambassador Finnick asked. For us. The chamber fell quiet again. Draven saw doubt flicker across a few faces, quickly suppressed. High Arbiter Yold rose from her pod and descended to the main floor. She approached Draven with careful steps, her silver skin glowing in the chamber's soft light. Commander, let me be direct with you. The Stellan trade guilds have already invested significant resources in Orion Arm expansion. Several council members have personal interests in these ventures. Your warning, however well-intentioned, threatens billions of credits in planned operations. So this is about money. This is about reality. The Concordat has dominated this region of space for 3,000 years. We have absorbed dozens of species, some peacefully, others not. Humans are simply the next opportunity. Draven looked into her cold, beautiful eyes. What happens when they refuse to be absorbed? Then we will teach them their place. Yold's voice hardened. As we have taught others before them. She turned to address the full council. We will vote tomorrow on Ambassador Finnick's proposal. I recommend full approval for first contact with humanity, with the goal of establishing labor agreements and trade relationships. Commander Saratha's concerns will be noted in the official record. Noted. Buried. Forgotten. Draven had one final card to play. High Arbiter, before you dismiss my testimony completely, perhaps you should know what happened after Station Koros. Yold paused. What do you mean? Annie Webb did not stop at that station. She spent the next 3 years hunting every being connected to her family's capture. Smugglers, station masters, research facility directors. She tracked them across 12 systems and killed them all. How do you know this? Because I met her again, 15 years later. She found me. She wanted me to know that her parents had died in a research facility 2 years before she could reach them. She wanted me to understand that every death on Station Koros was just the beginning. The chamber was silent. She told me something else, Draven continued. She said that humans do not forget. They do not forgive. They pass their memories down through generations. Children learn the names of those who wronged their ancestors. And they wait. He pointed at the data displays still showing human civilization. You see primitives fighting among themselves. I see a species practicing for the wars to come. You see weak, short-lived creatures. I see soldiers who have been hardened by a planet that tries to kill them every day. You see opportunity. I see the end of everything we have built. Ambassador Finnick laughed nervously. Drama worthy of the entertainment channels, Commander. But you cannot expect us to abandon a profitable venture based on one soldier's ancient memories. Draven looked around the chamber one last time. These politicians, these merchants, these comfortable beings who had never faced true danger. They could not imagine what was coming. No, he said finally. I suppose I cannot. He bowed stiffly and turned to leave. Behind him, he heard High Arbiter Yold call for a preliminary vote. The results were unanimous. The contact mission would proceed. Draven walked out of the chamber and into the corridor beyond. They had laughed at his warning. Soon, they would learn, and by then, it would be far too late. 3 months later, the diplomatic vessel Harmony's light crossed into human space. Draven stood near the back of the observation deck, watching the stars shift as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They had brought him along as a cultural advisor. Really, it was just politics. A way to silence his protests by making him part of the mission he had tried to stop. Ambassador Finnick stood at the front of the deck, his 4 eyes bright with excitement. 12 species representatives had joined the delegation, all eager to be part of history. Sensors are detecting multiple contacts, the ship's captain announced. They appear to be waiting for us. The view screen flickered to life. Ships. Human ships. Dozens of them arranged in perfect formation around the system's outer boundary. They were not the primitive vessels the Concordat's data had suggested. These were warships, sleek and angular, bristling with weapons that glowed with barely contained power. The delegation fell silent. This is Admiral Grace Porter of the Earth Defense Fleet. The voice came through clear and calm. Concordat vessel, you will follow the escort path we are transmitting. Any deviation will be considered hostile action. Welcome to human space. The transmission ended before anyone could respond. Draven watched Ambassador Finnick's confident smile fade into something closer to concern. The human escort led them to a diplomatic station near Earth's moon. Through the viewports, Draven caught his first glimpse of the human homeworld. Blue and green and white, wrapped in clouds. Beautiful and absolutely covered in orbital defense platforms. The delegation was brought to a conference room inside the station. Clean lines, simple furniture, no decoration except a single flag bearing the image of their planet. 2 humans waited for them. The first was a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back tight against her skull. She wore a military uniform covered in medals and insignia. Her eyes were calm, steady, and absolutely without warmth. The second was a tall man with dark skin and a gentle smile that did not reach his eyes. He wore civilian clothes, but moved like a predator. I am Admiral Porter, the woman said. This is Director Samuel Okonkwo of Intelligence Services. Please sit. The delegation arranged themselves around the conference table. Ambassador Finnick cleared his throat nervously. Admiral Porter, on behalf of the Galactic Concordat, I extend greetings and hopes for peaceful relations between our peoples. Peaceful relations. Admiral Porter repeated the words like they tasted strange. Tell me, Ambassador, what exactly does the Concordat mean by peaceful relations? Fennec launched into his prepared speech. Trade agreements, cultural exchange, labor opportunities for humans willing to work in Concordat space. He described it as a partnership, a chance for humanity to benefit from joining the greater galactic community. Throughout his speech, the two humans sat motionless. When he finished, the silence stretched painfully long. Director Okonkwo reached into his jacket and produced a small device. He placed it on the table and pressed a button. A holographic display bloomed to life. Maps, charts, lists of names and locations. These are the Concordat's slave routes through the Orion Arm, Okonkwo said, his voice soft. These are the research facilities where captured sentients are studied. These are the names of species that were absorbed into your Concordat and are now functionally extinct. He pressed another button. The display changed. And these are the names of human beings who were taken from colony ships over the past 200 years. Men, women, children, sold to laboratories, worked to death in mines, experimented on until they died. Ambassador Fennec's face had gone pale. Director, I assure you, the Concordat does not condone such activities. These are the actions of independent criminal organizations. Independent? Okonkwo smiled, and there was no kindness in it. Then perhaps you can explain this. The hologram shifted again. Financial records, transfer documents, communication logs. High Arbiter Yold's face appeared, alongside records of payments she had received from Stellan trafficking syndicates for over 30 years. Your leader profits from human suffering, Okonkwo said, as do 17 other council members currently present on your delegation ship. The room erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted denials. Accusations flew back and forth. Through it all, the two humans sat quietly and watched. Admiral Porter raised her hand. The noise stopped. We have 3 demands, she said. First, the immediate release of all human captives currently held in Concordat space. We know their locations. Second, reparations to the families of those who were taken and did not survive. Third, full membership in the Galactic Concordat as equal partners, with voting rights and military access. Ambassador Fennec found his voice. These demands are impossible. The Council would never agree to such terms. Then we will retrieve our people ourselves. Admiral Porter leaned forward, and Draven saw the predator behind her calm exterior. Our operatives have been embedded in your space for 50 years. We know your fleet positions, your supply lines, your command structures. We have technology you have not seen and weapons you cannot imagine. She stood, and suddenly the room felt very small. You have 72 hours to accept our terms. If you do not, we will consider the Concordat a hostile power and act accordingly. She paused at the door. I suggest you use the time wisely. The humans left. The delegation sat in stunned silence. Draven moved to the viewport and looked out at the fleet of human warships surrounding the station. 40 years ago, one human had terrified him. Now he understood. Annie had not been an exception. She had been a promise. Panic had a smell. Draven had learned this long ago, in the blood-soaked corridors of Station Koros. Now he smelled it again in the Grand Assembly Chamber as council representatives screamed at each other while human fleets positioned themselves at every jump point in Concordat space. 72 hours had seemed like plenty of time. It was not. High Arbiter Yold stood at the center of the chaos, her silver skin flickering with stress. She had tried everything. Threats, negotiations, bribes. The humans had responded to none of it. We must fight, she declared. The combined military strength of the Concordat can crush any enemy. These humans are bluffing. Military advisors stepped forward with holographic displays showing simulation after simulation. Human ships tore through Concordat formations with terrifying efficiency. Their weapons were faster, more precise. Their tactics were unpredictable. Every scenario ended the same way: defeat. Our best projections show 60% fleet losses in the first 6 hours, an admiral reported. And that assumes we engage them at our strongest point. If they hit our supply lines first, which their positioning suggests they intend to do, we lose everything within a week. Then we negotiate harder, Yold snapped. Everyone has a price. They do not want credits. Director Okonkwo's evidence had spread through the council like fire. Representatives who had profited from trafficking were being arrested by their own security forces. They want justice. They want their people back. They want us to acknowledge what we did. Yold's eyes swept the chamber, searching for support. She found none. The revelation of her corruption had shattered the alliances she had built over decades. Species that had followed her leadership now looked away when she spoke. Commander Solrath. Draven looked up. A Stellan representative was gesturing toward him. You warned us. You were the only one who warned us. Perhaps you should speak. Draven walked slowly to the center of the chamber. He felt every year of his 2 centuries weighing on his bones. What do you want me to say? He asked quietly. That I was right? That you should have listened? You know these things already. They will not save you now. Then what will? Draven looked around at the frightened faces, the powerful beings who had never imagined themselves as vulnerable. I told you about Annie Webb. I told you what she did to Station Koros. But I did not tell you why she let me live. He paused, gathering his thoughts. It was not because I was weak or because she pitied me. It was because in the middle of her captivity, when everyone else looked at her like cargo, I offered her water. I treated her like a person for one moment. That single act of basic decency was enough to make her spare my life. The chamber was silent. Humans do not fight because they enjoy violence. They fight because they remember. They remember every injustice, every stolen child, every broken promise. But they also remember kindness. They remember who stood with them and who stood against them. He pointed at the view screen, where human warships waited like patient predators. Right now, they see us as enemies. They see slavers and profiteers who took their families and sold them like animals. If we want to survive, we must show them something different. We must show them that we can be better. How? Someone asked. Accept their terms. All of them. Release their people. Pay the reparations. Give them the membership they demand. And then do something they do not expect. What? Draven looked at High Arbiter Yold. Surrender the ones responsible. Starting with her. Chaos erupted again. Guards moved toward Yold, then hesitated. She had ruled this council for 300 years. The thought of arresting her was almost unthinkable. Almost out of Kathrani Admiral stepped forward. High Arbiter Yold, you are hereby relieved of command pending investigation into charges of trafficking and corruption. Yold's face twisted with rage, then fear, then nothing at all. The mask fell away, revealing the hollow creature beneath. You fools, she whispered. You think surrendering to these animals will save you? They will destroy us anyway. It is in their nature. No. Draven stepped closer to her. It is in their nature to protect, to remember, to transform pain into purpose. You see monsters because you cannot imagine anything else. But I have seen what humans truly are. He thought of Annie, blood-covered but merciful, grief-stricken but determined, broken but never defeated. They are survivors, and survivors understand other survivors. That is our only hope. The vote was called. The terms were accepted. Yold was taken away in restraints, along with 16 other council members. The human delegation arrived for the formal signing. Admiral Porter entered the chamber with Director Okonkwo at her side. Behind them came a small army of diplomats and translators. Draven stood at the back of the chamber, watching history unfold. After the signing, Admiral Porter approached him. Commander Solrath. She extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. We know about your testimony. We know you tried to warn them. Draven took her hand carefully. Human grips were surprisingly strong. I failed, he said. They did not listen. But you tried. That matters to us. She paused. There is someone who wants to meet you. If you are willing. Draven felt his heart skip. 6 months later, he stood on Earth's surface for the first time. The sky was impossibly blue. The air smelled of growing things. Annie Webb waited for him at a memorial garden built for human victims of alien trafficking. She was old now, her dark hair turned white, her face lined with decades of struggle. But her brown eyes were the same. Beside her stood children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, an entire family that existed because she had refused to stop fighting. Draven. She said his name slowly, the way she had learned it 40 years ago in a blood-soaked station. You came. You invited me. Annie smiled. It was a real smile, warm and tired and peaceful. I wanted to thank you. That water you gave me, all those years ago, it reminded me that not everyone was an enemy. It helped me survive. I did so little. Kindness is never little. She took his remaining hand in both of hers. The council laughed at your warning, but you planted a seed. Seeds take time to grow. Draven looked at her family laughing together in the garden. Human children playing with Kathrani visitors. Former enemies learning to become friends that he finally understood. Humans were not death world monsters. They were gardeners, and they had just begun to grow.